The package sat on my kitchen counter like a coiled snake. No return address, just my name in precise, angular handwriting I didn't recognize. Inside, wrapped in crisp tissue paper, lay a photograph of my award-winning chocolate ganache cake from last week's charity gala. Someone had drawn a thick red X across it. Beneath the photo, a handwritten note read, "You'll never belong." I traced my fingers over the words, feeling the indentations in the paper. The writer had pressed hard, their anger bleeding through each letter. My hands trembled as I set it down. I'm Abigail, and until 10 minutes ago, I thought I was finally finding my place in the Miller family's culinary empire. Now this package had shattered that illusion. Everything okay? Matthew's voice startled me. I shoved the photo and note under a kitchen towel before my husband could see them. He stood in the doorway, adjusting his chef's coat, ready for another day at the family's flagship restaurant. Fine, I said, forcing a smile. Just going through some mail. He crossed the kitchen and kissed my cheek. Mother wants us at the house for dinner tonight. Says she has an announcement. Of course she did. Sylvia Miller never missed an opportunity to gather her court. I thought of her perfectly arranged dinner parties, where every compliment carried a barb, and every gesture held a hidden message. I have prep work to finish for tomorrow's wedding cake, I said. Abby. Matthew's tone held that familiar note of pleading. You know how she gets when we skip family dinner. I did know. The last time we missed one, she'd spent weeks telling anyone who'd listen how my common upbringing hadn't taught me proper family values. Fine, I said. I'll be there. After Matthew left, I pulled out the photo again. The red X seemed brighter now, more accusatory. Only family members had been at that gala. Only they would have known about the cake, would have had access to photograph it before it was served. My phone buzzed, a text from Jessica, coffee? Need to talk about something weird I overheard at the gala. I stared at the message, then back at the photo. My fingers clenched around the paper, crumpling its edges. After 5 years of smiling through Sylvia's subtle jabs and calculated slights, maybe it was time to stop playing the grateful daughter-in-law. I texted back, meet me in 20. Bring everything you know. The photo went into my purse. Whatever game Sylvia was playing, she'd chosen the wrong pastry chef to intimidate. I might not have been born a Miller, but I'd learned their most important lesson well: revenge, like the perfect dessert, is best served cold. Jessica slid her phone across the cafe table. Look at this. Someone posted it in the Miller Family Foundation group last night. The image showed my ganache cake again, but this time alongside one of Sylvia's classic recipes. The caption read, "True artistry versus modern mediocrity. Some traditions shouldn't be tampered with." The post disappeared an hour later, Jessica said, but not before the comments started. My coffee turned bitter in my mouth. Let me guess, the family rushed to defend tradition. Emily Thompson liked your cake. She's the only one who dared say anything positive. I remembered Emily at the gala, her quiet praise of my innovative techniques. Now her small act of rebellion made more sense. The family dinner tonight should be interesting, I said, pulling out the anonymous note. Jessica's eyes widened as she read it. You have to show this to Matthew. And watch him defend his mother again. No thanks. The Miller mansion loomed before us that evening, its perfectly manicured gardens matching Sylvia's perfectly coordinated dinner parties. Matthew squeezed my hand as we walked in. Mother's been working on this menu all week, he said. Try to be grateful. Know my place. He sighed. That's not what I meant. The dining room buzzed with family members, all gravitating around Sylvia like planets around a poisonous sun. She wore her signature pearl necklace, a family heirloom she never let me forget I wouldn't inherit. Abigail, darling. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. I hope you're not too disappointed about the foundation's decision. What decision? Matthew asked. Oh, didn't you tell him? Sylvia's voice dripped concern. The board voted this morning. They're going with traditional desserts for the Centennial Gala. Your modern takes were just a bit too ambitious for our clientele. The room fell silent. I felt every eye on me, waiting for my reaction. Emily, seated at the far end, looked down at her plate. Interesting, I said, my voice steady. Especially since the client specifically requested my chocolate ganache design last week. Plans change, dear. In this family, we understand that tradition prevails. Sylvia raised her wine glass. Speaking of tradition, I have an announcement. The board has appointed me as the new creative director for all Miller establishments. Matthew's hand found mine under the table, but I barely felt it. In my mind, I saw the red X across my cake photo. Heard the whispers of modern mediocrity, felt the weight of every slight and dismissal over the years. Congratulations, I said, raising my own glass. But in that moment, watching Sylvia bask in her victory, I made a decision. She wanted tradition. I'd give her a tradition, the time-honored tradition of revenge served cold, precise, and devastating. The old recipe box was heavy with secrets. Emily's hands trembled as she pulled out yellowed cards and newspaper clippings in the back office of the Miller's flagship restaurant. Look at these dates, she whispered, spreading them across the desk. Every time someone in the family started gaining recognition, something went wrong. Catastrophically wrong. I picked up a clipping from 15 years ago. Rising star chef James Miller's new restaurant shuttered after health code violations. James, Matthew's cousin who'd moved to Chicago after the scandal. He was my brother, Emily said. Those violations were fabricated. Someone planted evidence the night before the inspection. The pieces clicked together like a perfect lattice pattern. Sylvia was on the health board then. Emily nodded, pulling out another clipping. And here, when Aunt Regina's catering business was about to land a royal wedding contract. Suddenly, her signature recipes started failing. Key ingredients mysteriously replaced. Let me guess, Sylvia had access to the kitchen. She always does. Emily's voice cracked. Last year, I was supposed to handle desserts for the governor's ball. The morning of the event, my soufflés collapsed. All of them. Someone had tampered with the oven temperature. The revelation hit me like a blast of freezer air. That's when Sylvia stepped in with her emergency classic dessert selection. She's been doing this for decades, Emily said. Anyone who threatens her position. She drew a finger across her throat. My phone buzzed, a text from Matthew, Mother's called an emergency board meeting. Something about restructuring the pastry department. She's making her move, I said, showing Emily the message. Now that she's creative director, she'll have complete control. Emily reached into her bag, pulled out a small leather-bound notebook. This is my brother's journal from that year. The entry stopped the day before the health inspection. Her eyes met mine. Use it. Please. Someone needs to stop her. The weight of the journal felt like lead in my hands. Matthew won't believe this without proof. Then we'll get proof. Emily's voice hardened. The Centennial Gala next month, Sylvia will be handling everything personally. If we can catch her in the act. It would destroy her. It would free us all. I thought of Matthew, of how this would hurt him. But then I remembered James, Regina, Emily, all the lives Sylvia had crushed to maintain her control. The anonymous note suddenly made perfect sense. You'll never belong, because Sylvia made sure no one else could. We'll need help, I said. Someone with access to the security systems. Emily smiled. Father has been asking questions about the restaurant's financial records. Particularly the years when certain accidents happened. I think he's finally starting to see through her perfect facade. The recipe box sat between us, a testament to years of carefully orchestrated destruction. Time to add a new recipe to the collection, one for revenge, served at exactly the right temperature. I found Matthew in his father's study, staring at James's journal like it might bite him. The leather cover seemed darker in the evening light, weighted with 15 years of buried truth. "This can't be right," he said. "Mother wouldn't." "She did." I touched the security footage printout Emily had provided, showing Sylvia entering the restaurant's kitchen at 3 a.m. the morning of James's inspection. "She does. There could be explanations. Like there's an explanation for this." I pulled out my phone, played the recording Jessica had captured at yesterday's board meeting. Sylvia's voice, crystal clear: "We need to protect our legacy from these modern influences. Some people simply don't understand our traditions, our standards. They need to be guided out." Matthew's hands clenched. "She's talking about business strategy. She's talking about me. About Emily. About anyone who threatens her control." The study door creaked. Robert stood there, his chef's jacket replaced by a worn cardigan. "I heard everything," he said quietly. "I've been blind for too long." "Father," Matthew started. "No." Robert crossed to his desk, pulled out a thick folder. "Financial records. Every accident, every coincidence that benefited your mother. The numbers tell a story I should have read years ago." My phone buzzed. "Emily, emergency. Kitchen. Now." "I have to go," I said, but Matthew caught my arm. "Whatever you're planning," he said, "remember she's still my mother." I looked at his hand on my arm, thought of all the times he'd tried to bridge the gap between his two worlds. "And I'm your wife. When will that be enough?" The kitchen was dark when I arrived, except for a single light over the prep station. Emily stood there, face pale. "Look," she whispered. My station had been ransacked. Equipment scattered, recipes torn. But worse, my special order ingredients for tomorrow's charity event demonstration were ruined. Expensive chocolates melted, delicate sugar work shattered. "She was here 10 minutes ago," Emily said. "I saw her leave. She was smiling." I picked up a broken sugar sculpture, its edges sharp as betrayal. Tomorrow's demonstration wasn't just any event, it was for the Children's Hospital Foundation. My chance to prove modern techniques could serve tradition, not destroy it. "She's not just attacking my career anymore," I said. "She's hurting the people we're supposed to help." Emily touched my shoulder. "What do we do?" I looked at the destruction, thought of Matthew's torn loyalty, Robert's years of willful blindness, James's ruined dreams. The sharp sugar piece cut into my palm, drawing blood. "We end this," I said. "Not for revenge anymore. For justice." The cut stung, but I welcomed the pain. It was time to show Sylvia that some traditions, like the tradition of consequences, couldn't be controlled, even by her. The pregnancy test sat on my bathroom counter like a time bomb. 2 pink lines, clear, undeniable, terrifying. I hadn't told Matthew yet. Hadn't told anyone. But as I watched Emily install the hidden cameras in the main kitchen, I realized everything had changed. "The Centennial Gala prep starts tomorrow," Emily said, adjusting the final lens. "Sylvia will be here at dawn, personally overseeing everything. Including sabotaging anything that threatens her vision." I touched my stomach unconsciously, thinking of the legacy I now carried. A legacy Sylvia would try to control, just like everything else. Robert appeared in the doorway, holding a thick manila envelope. The board meeting minutes from the last decade. Every decision, every accident that pushed out talented family members. He hesitated. "There's something else. Charles wants to see you. Alone." The family patriarch rarely left his private wing of the mansion. Finding him in his study, surrounded by photographs of 4 generations of Millers, made my throat tight. "Sit," he said, pushing aside his oxygen tank. "Tell me why you're really doing this." "Because she needs to be stopped." "No." His eyes, sharp despite his age, fixed on mine. The truth. Because, I stopped, seeing the photograph on his desk. A young woman in chef whites, smiling beside a familiar-looking cake. That's my daughter. Sarah. Sylvia's predecessor as creative director, before her tragic accident in the kitchen. The investigation ruled it an accident. I never believed that. My hand trembled as I picked up the photo. The cake design, it was nearly identical to mine from the charity gala. History repeats, Charles said quietly. Unless someone breaks the cycle. My phone buzzed. Jessica, security footage from last night. You need to see this now. The video showed Sylvia in the storage room, replacing ingredients in containers labeled for the Centennial Gala. But it was the second figure that made my blood freeze, Matthew, standing watch at the door. I'm sorry, his text read moments later. She's my mother. She promised it wouldn't hurt you, just delay the new menu launch until after the gala. The betrayal burned worse than any kitchen fire. I thought of the child growing inside me, of Sarah's haunting smile in that old photograph, of every dream Sylvia had crushed to maintain her power. The cameras are ready, Emily said when I returned to the kitchen. Tomorrow's prep begins at 5 a.m. I pulled out my phone, dialed Matthew's number. Straight to voicemail. I know what you did, I said. Now watch what I'm going to do. The kitchen lights flickered off automatically at midnight. In the darkness, I touched the butterfly pendant Matthew had given me on our wedding day, then removed it. Some traditions needed to end. And some endings needed witnesses. The Centennial Gala buzzed with 300 of Boston's elite, but I only watched two people, Sylvia. Proudly presenting her traditional dessert showcase, and Matthew, hovering at her shoulder like a guilty shadow. The hidden cameras fed directly to Jessica's laptop in the back office, recording everything. She's heading to the kitchen, Emily whispered through my earpiece. Just like we predicted. I slipped through the service entrance, staying in the shadows. Sylvia stood at my workstation. Carefully adding something to my signature chocolate ganache, the centerpiece meant to honor Charles's late daughter Sarah. The recipe needed adjustment, Sylvia said without turning. Just like you do. I know about Sarah. My voice echoed in the empty kitchen. I know what really happened that night. She turned slowly, perfectly composed except for the slight tremor in her hands. Sarah was reckless. Traditional methods exist for a reason. She was innovative. Like me. I moved closer. That's why you had to stop her. Matthew understands. Her smile turned cruel. He chose family loyalty. What did you choose, Abigail? Besides failure? The kitchen door swung open. Matthew entered, followed by Robert and Charles. Right on schedule. Show them, I said. Show them what you just added to my ganache. Mother. Matthew's voice cracked. What did you do? Sylvia's laugh was brittle. Nothing she didn't deserve. Nothing I haven't done before to protect this family's legacy. Like you protected it from Sarah. Charles wheeled forward, oxygen tank hissing. My daughter's recipes. Her innovations. All buried with her after your accident. You have no proof. I pulled out my phone, played the security footage from last night. Matthew's face crumpled as he watched himself standing guard. Then I played the older footage Robert had found, Sarah's last night in the kitchen, Sylvia tampering with equipment. It's over, I said. Is it? Sylvia's hand shot out, knocking the ganache bowl to the floor. Your centerpiece is ruined. The guests are waiting. What will they think when the newest Miller failure can't deliver? I stared at the spreading chocolate puddle, feeling the weight of 3 generations watching. Then I felt it, a flutter in my stomach, so faint I might have imagined it. My hand pressed against my abdomen. You're right, I said quietly. Traditional methods exist for a reason. I moved to the refrigerator, pulled out a covered cake stand. That's why I made two. One for you to destroy, one to serve. A lesson Sarah taught me through her recipes: always have a backup plan. The kitchen fell silent except for Charles's oxygen tank. Matthew stepped forward, but I held up my hand. Don't. My voice shook. Just watch what happens next. I lifted the cake cover, revealing Sarah's signature design, perfectly executed. In that moment, I saw Sylvia's carefully constructed world begin to crumble, one sugar crystal at a time. You want to know why I did it? Sylvia's voice cut through the stunned silence. Look at her, standing there with Sarah's recipe, with my son's loyalty. With everything I spent decades building. She grabbed a knife from the prep station. You think you've won? You think exposing me changes anything? The knife trembled in her hand. Matthew stepped forward, but Charles raised his hand, stopping him. Tell them about the fire, I said quietly. Tell them what really happened the night Sarah died. Sylvia's laugh turned hysterical. She was going to ruin everything. Modern techniques, fusion desserts, she would have destroyed our reputation. Just like you're trying to do. Mother, Matthew whispered. What did you do? What I had to do. The knife clattered to the counter. Sarah wouldn't listen. She was going to present her new menu to the board. Charles would have given her everything. Her voice broke. I only meant to damage the equipment. I didn't know she would come back that night. Charles's oxygen tank hissed in the silence. My daughter burned alive protecting your lies. I protected this family. Sylvia turned to Matthew, desperate. Everything I did was for you, for our legacy. Tell them you understand. Matthew looked at me, then at his mother. I pressed my hand against my stomach, feeling our future kick against my palm. The legacy, he said slowly, was never yours to protect. No. Charles wheeled forward. It wasn't. He pulled an envelope from his jacket. The board voted this morning. Unanimous decision. The Miller Restaurant Group has a new creative director. Sylvia lunged for the envelope, but Robert caught her arm. It's over, he said. Abigail Miller, Charles continued, effective immediately. The kitchen door burst open. Emily and Jessica entered with 2 police officers. We have the footage, Jessica said. All of it. Including Sarah's last night. Sylvia sagged in Robert's grip. You don't understand, she whispered. None of you understand what it takes to keep a legacy pure. I picked up Sarah's recipe book, traced the burned edges. Legacy isn't about purity, I said. It's about growth. Sarah understood that. And so does your grandchild. Matthew's head snapped up. What? I'm pregnant. The words hung in the air like smoke. I wasn't sure how to tell you, after everything. Sylvia's face crumpled as the officers approached. No, she breathed. Not my grandchild. You can't. Actually, Charles said, she can. And she will. He nodded to the officers. Take her. As they led Sylvia away, I opened Sarah's recipe book to a marked page. A note in the margin read, Tradition is just innovation that survived. Below it, in Sarah's elegant script. The future belongs to those brave enough to create it. Matthew touched my stomach gently, and in that moment, I felt the weight of 3 generations shift, realigning around a new center. A new legacy rising from the ashes of the old. The kitchen timer chimed as Sarah's recipe book lay open beside me, its pages now restored and carefully preserved. My hands moved through the familiar motions, tempering chocolate, pulling sugar. Building the delicate structures that would become my signature piece for the reopening of the Miller flagship restaurant. Emily worked beside me, her techniques blending seamlessly with mine. The press is already gathering outside, she said, adding final touches to her section of the display. Let them wait. I adjusted the sugar sculpture, thinking of how Sarah's innovations had laid the groundwork for everything we'd created. The past and future, perfectly balanced. Matthew entered, carrying our daughter Sarah in his arms. At 6 months old, she already watched the kitchen with intensity, reaching for anything that sparkled. "The board's here," he said. "And Father wants to know if you're ready for the announcement." I touched the butterfly pendant he'd given me last week, replacing the one I'd removed that night. Different butterfly, different meaning. This one I'd earned. Almost. I turned to the last component, a chocolate piece that had taken weeks to perfect. As I lifted it, Sarah squealed and reached out, her tiny hand catching the edge. The structure swayed, threatening to shatter. But instead of breaking, it transformed, the pieces settling into a new pattern, more complex, more interesting than my original design. An accident becoming art. "Perfect," Robert said from the doorway. He'd been watching, understanding dawning on his face. That's what Sarah, both Sarahs, tried to teach us. Real legacy isn't about preservation. It's about transformation. Charles wheeled in behind him, oxygen tank quiet with its recent upgrades. "The papers are signed," he said. "The trust is divided equally between all family members who contribute to the business. No more single point of control." I thought of Sylvia in her prison cell, still believing she'd protected something precious by destroying it. The investigation had uncovered 3 more suspicious accidents over the years. Some wounds would never fully heal. "Ready?" Matthew asked, adjusting our daughter's tiny chef's hat, a gift from Jessica. I looked at my family, Emily with her quiet strength, Robert's newfound wisdom, Charles's hard-won peace, Matthew's unwavering support. And our daughter, named for a woman who dared to innovate. "One last touch," I said, taking Sarah's recipe book. Inside the cover, I wrote, "To the next generation, may you find the courage to create, the wisdom to preserve, and the strength to know the difference." The timer chimed again. Time to present our new menu to the world. But as I moved toward the door, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the steel countertop, not quite belonging, not quite separate. Something new entirely. Just like the perfect recipe.